right? Okay. So if you don't have question for your last class, then today we're going to start a very important topic and very popular topic in machine learning, which is support vector machine. It is considered to be a bit like hard in comparison to other models. So because it needs a bit prerequisites in from the optimization field. So I will try to cover those in bit detail, so that you will have some essential prerequisite and understanding of the concepts which are required to solve the to train the model of support vector machine or to understand this model, right? So please feel free to stop me if you have any problem in between, right? And because and if it is just afternoon, so if you I got disconnected, please drop me a call so that I can able to know that I'm not connected. So before then that, I just want to go and let you know like what is Lagrange multipliers and KKT conditions, because it is required there, and it will be required so at so many places when you will be doing your machine learning or optimization, some optimization there. So it is a very important concept that is there in the optimization, right? So let's see what is this, right? So can you see the screen? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's say I have some function gx, right? So I say that gx is nothing, but it is x1 plus x2 minus 1 is less than equal to 0. How I come to this point, right? Let's say x1 plus x2 equals to 1, right? So x1 plus x2 equals to 1. So basically, if it is in 2 dimension, I am talking about a hyperplane, which is a line, and which goes through this here, right? X1 plus x2 equals to 1, right? But when I just convert this x1 plus x2 equals to 1 into this form of gx, which says that x1 plus x2 minus 1 is less than equal to 0. So the idea is that I want to put my gx less than 0 always, right? So it is always less than 0. So I want to put my gx towards so such that it should be less than 0, right? So if I say that x1 plus x2 is less than or equal to 1, so it means I'm talking about this area, right? I'm talking about this area. Or in 2 dimension, if you draw a line of x1 plus x2, this is this line, and if I say that it is less than 1, so I'm talking about this area in 2 dimension, right? This is what it is. And if I want to convert it into a gx form, which is into the standard form, which says gx is always less than equal to 0, right? What I will do, I take this 1 and bring this into the right hand side, and then this is x1 plus x2 minus 1 is less than 0. Fine. So similarly, so this is one thing, right? If I have a constant which says that x1 plus is x2 is greater than 1, right? So I'm talking about this area, right? Which is above the hyperplane. So if that is the case, and if I need to convert it into a standard notation, which is says gs is always less than equal to 0, so I will do this way, right? And still it says that it is the area above this line or hyperplane. But when I see it in 3 dimensions, so this x1 plus x2 minus 1 is nothing, but it is kind of this hyperplane in 3 dimension, right? If you take a gradient of this hyperplane, what it says 1 1, right? So the gradient is 1 1, which is always at this side, right? You take a gradient at any point, it is always in this side. It is always at the 1 1 side, right? So it means the feasible region is opposite to the gradient. Remember that. If you take a gradient of gx, it says 1 1 for this constraint, but the feasible region which I want to say that x1 plus x2 is less than 1 is the opposite of the gradient. Remember this term. Similarly here, if you take the gradient of this gx, it says minus 1 1, right? It says minus 1 1. And when you take the feasible region, it is opposite to the gradient of this gx, right? So the takeaway point from this slide is, if your constant is in the form of gx is always less than equal to 0, and if you take a gradient of gx, the feasible region is opposite of that gradient. Any questions on this? Yes or no? Can you type this for me? Like, I should get to know like whether you know this. Okay. So the takeaway point is that when you take a gradient of gx, it is always pointing opposite to the feasible region, right? This is a takeaway point from this. Okay. Now let's come to this main concept. So now the idea is I want to minimize my function fx. I want to minimize my function fx such that my constraint is in the standard form. Gx is always less than equal to 0, right? So if I want to minimize my fx, so I need to walk opposite to the gradient of fx, right? So because this is x, let's say my function is x square, x1 square plus x2 square. So if you see in 3D, it will be this kind of a bowl, right? If it will be this kind of a bowl, and the gradient is always outside, right? It is always pointing outside, which is nothing but where the height is increasing. So if you want to minimize it, you need to walk against this gradient of fx, right? You need to walk against this gradient, so that then you take a walk, then take a gradient, take a walk until you will reach to the minimum, right? So if the problem is for minimization, it means you need to walk against the gradient of fx also, right? So there are two things now. The feasible region is opposite to the gradient of gx, and just to minimize, I want to walk opposite to the gradient of fx, right? So let's see it visually. So if I want to minimize x square plus x1 square plus x2 square, so the minimum will be 0, 0, right? So I say you should minimize the function such that x1 plus x2 minus 1 is less than 0, right? It means I'm talking about all those points which is less than 1, right? So this is a line which is x1 plus x2 equals to 1. So below this line is x1 plus x2 is less than 1. So this is my feasible region shown in gray, right? So if this is my feasible region and I want to minimize my function, so it means the optimal point is in the feasible region, right? So the gradient of gx will be outside, right? The gradient of gx will be outside, but and I say that feasible region is opposite of gx. So it means I want to take just to take a feasible region. This is the opposite of minus gx gradient, right? And if I take the direction where I should minimize, it is also against the opposite of fx. So this is gx, gradient of gx. I need to look opposite of gx to see the feasible region, which is this. This is opposite, right? Then I want to minimize my function, but function is such that x1 square plus x2 square. So my gradient is also always out. It is like always pointing outside, right? It is always pointing outside. It is always pointing outside. So wherever you're standing, you want to walk against that gradient, right? Wherever you're standing. So if you are standing somewhere here, then your gradient, then the direction where you want to minimize the function is this direction, right? So here you can see that the gradient from gx feasible region, the direction of a feasible region, and the direction where you want to minimize is same, right? They are parallel here. But my constraint is not affecting anywhere, because my feasible point is actually in the feasible region, right? So if I don't apply my that activation region, then also the solution will be same, right? So it means applying the constraint will not affect my solution. Applying the constraint will not affect my solution, because my solution is in the region, and I can ignore to see the constraints here. This is one case. Let's see the second case. So I want to minimize my function, the same function, but now my constraint is this, right? So if I take the gradient of gx, this is in this direction. So it means the feasible region is in the opposite direction, right? So this is the direction of a feasible region, which is opposite to the Gx gradient. Then I need to take a walk to minimize my fx, right? So if I'm standing somewhere here, so the gradient is outside, so I need to take a walk in opposite direction, right? I need to take a walk in opposite direction. So here you see the direction of a feasible region and the direction to minimize is anti-parallel, right? And also my constant is effective here. Why my constant is effective here? Because I need to make sure that I want a solution from the feasible region, which is a gray portion. So the function that can be minimized up to this point only, which is a black dot. Though the more feasible, the more minimum points are there, but they are not in the feasible region. So I cannot consider this as my solution. The solution is only where this line is available. So the solution is available actually at the boundary, and my directions will be anti-parallel here. Which directions I'm talking about? So see it again. So I'm saying that my feasible direction is this, right? This is a feasible region direction, and I want to take a walk in opposite of the gradient of fx, which is this direction, right? So they are anti-parallel. They are anti-parallel, right? So I can come up with a conclusion such that the gradient of fx is equal to negative of lambda. So it is anti-parallel, but I don't know what is this magnitude. For an example, 1 is anti-parallel of minus 3, right? 1 is anti-parallel of 3, but if I want to equate them, then I need to multiply this 1 with -3, right? -3. Then I can say that it is equal to this. So it means there should be some factor which I want to add to equate this equation. So here this lambda is the one that is equating this function, right? So if I am in this case where my constant is not active, right, then I say that my gradient of delta fx is 0. In that case, I say if it is 0, then I put lambda equals to 0, which says that my constants are not active at all, right? When I put lambda equals to 0, so my left hand side and right hand side are equal to 0, and hence it satisfies my first case where I can say that lambda equals to 0. But let's see second case. The gradient of a function is 2, right? But I need to take but this is a case of anti-parallel. So my gradient of gx is -1, right? To equate a equation, this, because it is an anti-parallel, I need to put negative to equate because they were anti-parallel, and I want to just multiply some lambda also, which is 2 here, right? So lambda is always positive, either it equals to 0 or it is greater than 0. This negative will automatically come just to equate the anti-parallel thing, right? So if you bring this whole side onto right hand side, you can say that lambda gradient of fx plus lambda into gradient of gs is equals to 0. So this equation will always hold whether the constraints are active. If the constraints are active, then lambda will play a role, and if the constraints are not active, then my lambda will be 0, and I will just minimizing my function there was no constraints available. So this is the thing that is always hold, right? Any questions so far? You can write yes or no if you don't have any question. Okay, fine, very nice. So if you don't have any questions, so let's see what is KKT condition. In KKT condition, I myself said that my constant is in this form, right? So it is always hold. I say that lambda is always greater than equal to 0 because of this condition, right? Just to hold this situation, My lambda is a cost always greater than equal to 0. And this is the most important situation. I think this is known as complementary slackness condition. It says that if I multiply my lambda with my gx, it is equal to 0 always. So let's see why this third condition hold. If my constant is inactive, then my lambda is 0, right? Then my lambda is 0. So whatever gx, if you multiply gx with 0, it will be 0. So when my constraints are inactive, lambda is 0, and it will make my first case true. Let's say now my second case. My second case, that when lambda is not 0, it means my constraints are active. If my constraints are active, then this gx is always less than equal to 0. But if I say that my constraints are active and gx is always less than 0, then my solution is definitely at the boundary. And boundary says that gx is equals to 0. So that's why this slackness condition holds. And it says either lambda is 0, means constraints are inactive. And if constraints are active, then my solution will be at boundary, and boundary says that gx is equals to 0, right? So it is important. This third condition is important. Yes or no for this point? Do you understood this third complementary slackness condition? Very nice. All of you understood, please write yes, so that I can able to understand that this is very nice. Good. Very good. Very nice. So this is an important concept. I would suggest you to read. So I have tried to take this concept from Boyd, right? Chapter 5, and I try to just map these things from there. So there is one book known as Convex Optimization, chapter 5. There is a concern, he has introduced a duality concept. So in that duality, it is found that Lagrangian multiplier involved. So I have taken these things from there. So this is KKT condition, and they're quite simple to understand if you get the gist of it, right? So now let's see the last thing. So what we say now, if these are the things available, if you have some optimization problem like this, you want to minimize fx given to some constant gx, then you can form actually an unconstrained problem by merging your constraint with your objective function. So what you say, that you just multiply your constraint with some multiplier lambda and then add it with your objective function, and this total function is known as Lagrangian, right? So let's take a derivative of this Lagrangian with respect to x, right? And then take a derivative of this Lagrangian with respect to lambda. So first take a derivative with respect to x. If you take a derivative of Lagrangian with respect to x, what you will get? You will get derivative of fx, right? Plus lambda derivative of gx, right? Derivative of gx, and because you want to find out the critical point, you should put it equals to 0. The moment you put it equals to 0, what is this condition? This is the same condition which we have just discussed, right? So Lagrangian automatically impose this condition here, right? And when you take a derivative of lambda with respect to 0 of a Lagrangian, what you will get? When you take a derivative with respect to lambda, you will get gx, right? Only gx. And you put it equals to 0, it is a boundary condition, right? When your constants are active, right? So this automatically holds through a Lagrangian. So you just actually can merge your constant with your objective function by multiplying it with a Lagrangian multiplier, which is known as a lambda, right? So this is the last thing that you need to know, just to connect all these dots. So I feel that you now able to make some sense out of the Lagrangian, right? Lagrangian is a function that can merge some constants with by multiplying some multiplier, which is lambda. Sometimes people say that it is a Lagrangian multiplier there, right? Fine. Yes and no. Okay, cool. Good. Good. Very good. Very good. So then let's try to see the third concept here. once you understand what is Lagrangian and KKT conditions, then let's see the third concept known as duality. So I want to show you it from like a geometrical perspective. So you have some Lagrangian L, right? So this Lagrangian is, so this Lagrangian, you know what it is, right? It is just like a, objective function plus some constant multiplied by multiplier. So now what I do, I see this Lagrangian as a function of a lambda, right? So what we do, we just take a Lagrangian, and for every lambda, we minimize this function. So let's see what does it mean. So let's say my function is this, right? This dark function, dark curve. So you have some constant gx which says that they should always be less than equal to 0. So they are less than 0 from within this range, right? So my gx is less than 0 in this range. So you want to minimize it. You want to minimize your function such that gx should be less than 0. So it means your minimum should come here, right? Because the constants are active from here to here, and therefore you need to see your function in these constants, and the minimum is here, right? It is here somewhere at the boundary condition because my constants are active here, right? This was a primal situation when I am seeing them separately, where my constants are active and I need to see there only my function, and then I will be minimizing it, right? If this is the case, right, then I will convert into a Lagrangian. Lagrangian means I am just putting my f plus lambda g, right? Plus lambda g, right? This is my function, Lagrangian, L equals to f plus lambda g. I am seeing that you should see this Lagrangian like this, and you take a minimum for every lambda. So you put lambda equals to minus infinity to plus infinity, right? You take minus infinity to plus infinity, lambda from minus infinity to plus infinity, and for each of value you minimize this function L. So let's see how to see this thing. So let's say first you put lambda equals to 0. When you put lambda equals to 0, it means f plus lambda g, right? When you put lambda equals to 0, it means your Lagrangian is equals to function, right? So your Lagrangian equals to function because lambda equals to 0. You minimize. If you minimize it, then this is the point which you will get, right? This is the point which you will get. Then you take a lambda 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. Oh, sorry. This is not the point. Sorry. So this is the point which you'll get because you're minimizing your function. You're minimizing your function here, right? Because your Lagrangian is equals to f plus lambda g. F plus lambda g. When I say lambda equals to 0, it means you are talking about your function and you are actually minimizing your function without any constraints. So this was your minimum. Then you put your lambda equals to 0.01, 0.02, 0.03, 0.04, and for every value of lambda, you are minimizing your Lagrangian over x. So it will be like this. So these dots will come somewhere here, here, right? Then it will come here, here, and it will finally reach to this point, right? So if you just take it, your lambda continuously from -1 to +1 and plot a minimum there, so you see this function as this way, right? You see this function, which is a function in terms of a lambda. So for every lambda, you are calculating your Lagrangian and then minimizing your Lagrangian over x. This is known as duality. The dual function is always concave, right? And if it is concave, then we can apply all the convex optimization function here. So properties there, and the minima will be, maximum will be global maximum, right? So any maximum will be global maximum. That is the advantage here, right? So we are actually taking a duality concept. We are converting our primal problem into dual problem. Primal problem may not be convex, right? Here you can see that this problem, this function is not convex here, but the dual problem always a convex problem, right? Because my dual function is concave, and concave is nothing but negative of convex, right? So my dual function is convex, and then you minimize it, you will find out a unique solution. So that's why people convert into a duality, just to convert, take an advantage of a convexity, right? So it may be, it may and it may not be the situation when my solutions are same, right? So for an example, here the solution from duality and the solution from primality, they differ, right? They differ into the magnitude, right? So, but always my dual function is a lower bound of my primal solution. The solution will be same when I meet KKT conditions for my optimal solutions. So in short, just to understand support vector machine, so my primal and dual, the solution from a primal and the solution from dual actually give me the same solution, because the KKT conditions hold for the optimal solution over conditions, right? Fine. So once you understood all these concepts of duality, Lagrangian, and then KKT condition, then we are ready to proceed for understanding a support vector machine. Before I dive into the concept of support vector machine, I just want to give you some few seconds to think, and if you have any question, please let me know. Any questions? You can show your participation by saying no. Maximum of you are attentive. Very good. Very nice. Okay. So if you don't have any questions, I feel that they are really tricky concepts if you go them over them and you try to understand them. So I hope this video will help you a lot in your future also, when you just see this video back. So now let's come to the concept of support vector machine, which says it is nothing but it's a maximum margin classifier. So let's understand what is maximum margin classifier, right? So I have, let's say, two points in my data set, and they are linearly separable. So I want to find out a hyperplane such that that hyperplane should dividing this region into such a region that I will have 100% accuracy. So there could be infinite solution. So I will be a bit quick on this, because I have discussed this hyperplane concept so many times in perceptron, in logistic regression, right? So I have gone through it. So I assume that you are having a good understanding of what is hyperplane here. So now I will find out a hyperplane. This is one of the hyperplane, right? Which can give me a solution which is 100% with 100% accuracy. But if you see the perpendicular distance of this x from this hyperplane is this, right? Even somebody comes and say that I have another hyperplane, which is this. If you see the perpendicular distance of this class from this hyperplane, which is very small. So what do you think? This is hyperplane 1, right? And this is hyperplane 2. Which hyperplane is better, 1 or 2? In perceptron, all solutions are same, right? So a perceptron is always giving me a hyperplane which can linearly separable your classes. So if you just ask me whether in perceptron which hyperplane I will get, I cannot distinguish it. In perceptron, I can get 1 also, and I can get 2 also. But as you say that 2 is good, because the margins are more with respect to 1. And if I have more margins, then my generalization error will be less. Let's see why it is. So I try to give you a bit intuition. So the idea is like there will be a distribution over some classes. So if there is a distribution over this X class, so there is a probability that in this neighborhood, these classes, the samples which are available in the neighborhood of these classes will belong to the same class. Similarly, if you have some another class, the in neighborhood, the probability is very high that the samples which present in the neighborhood will belongs to the 0 class, right? So if you have very small margins, right? So the sample which found here then you say that it belongs to this class, right? Because the margins are small. But if margins are high, right? But if margins are high, then in the neighborhood, right? If my margin is this one, then in this neighborhood, this point belongs to this class, and which actually support my intuition of distribution, because the neighborhood will says that the likelihood is very high that the sample is belongs to the cross class rather than the zero class, right? So this is a bit the for intuition for this, and my generalization error will be reduced if I am having a maximum margins there, right? So the idea is to find out a hyperplane such that I can maximize my margins. So maximizing the margin in relation to what? It is relative to the samples which are actually very near to the hyperplane. So there could be this situation, right? There could be this situation such that I have these 2 points for one class and these 0 points to other class, right? If I found out a hyperplane, I will be comparing only with respect to these 2 points because they are near to the hyperplane, and I will ignore these points which are farther from the hyperplane, right? So I am actually calculating my margins with respect to those samples which are near to my hyperplane, right? Remember that I am only calculating my perpendicular distance with respect to the samples which are falling very near to my decision boundary, right? So the idea is to maximize the margin to minimize the marginalization error, right? And this is like what it is shown here, which I have just discussed, right? So you are maximizing your margin, and here by symmetry you can say that if this distance is m by this is m and this is m, the total distance between these blue dots will be 2m, right? And all things are same. It is below the hyperplane, so all points belong to the negative class. This is above the hyperplane. This all points belong to the positive class. I hope you remember this. Can you quickly write yes or no for this point? If the points fall below to the hyperplane, they are negative, and the points fall above to the hyperplane, they are positive. I have just let you know this so many times. By this, you can close your eyes and let everybody tell that this is the case. So I expect this thing from you. Right? Okay, very nice, good. Then this is the motive of the model is like that I will find out a decision boundary such that my margins should be maximized. Very nice. Okay, so the same equation of a hyperplane, right? And this will be the sign of my yx. If it is above the hyperplane, it is positive. If it is below the hyperplane, it is negative. So if I say that my hyperplane is doing good, it means the accuracy is 100%. It means all the points which belongs to class 1, they are actually positive, and all the points which belongs to -1, they are my yx negative. It means my accuracy is 100%. So I can summarize this all one paragraph which I have just said into one statement mathematically this way, right? What I say, this is my target label. It could be +1 and -1. Yx is nothing but it's a sign from a hyperplane. So if it is always positive, if I multiply them, for an example, my label was negative, so my t was negative, and my point is actually below the hyperplane, so I get some negative number delta. So if I multiply this -1 with negative delta, I get some positive number. Similarly, if my point is above the hyperplane and the target value is positive, so I multiply both positive, I will get positive. For every point, if it is greater than 0, it means all points are correctly classified. And if any of the point is violating this situation, it means there is an error. You agree with this point? It is a very subtle point. I think you should grasp this. Very nice. Very good. Good. Okay. Then this is a hyperplane. This is a perpendicular distance from the hyperplane. We have already discussed. So now let's say you want to find out a perpendicular distance of hyperplane for each of the points. So there are some points here, there are some points here. So you want to find out a perpendicular distance for every hyperplane, as for every point, right? So this is your distance 1, this is your distance 2, this is distance 3, this is distance 4, right? So you are calculating distance one by one. How to do that? This is the formula to calculate a perpendicular distance. So you are plugging your point into an equation of a hyperplane and dividing it by the norm of a W. W is nothing but it will tell you what is the orientation of a hyperplane. So it means if it is correctly classified, so this situation always holds. So I am assuming that my hyperplane is actually doing good, and if it is doing good, everything says my accuracy is 100%, and this situation will always hold. So that now assuming that everything is accuracy is 100%, what is the perpendicular distance for each of the point? So you will get this. You plug your formula of yn, you will get this. So you are getting actually the perpendicular distance of every point from the hyperplane when it is correctly classified. Yes or no? Quickly. You understood till this point? Very good. Very good. Very nice. Cool. Good. So now if I know that everything is assuming that everything is correctly classified, what is the perpendicular distance? Now I will do what? I will minimize. I will try to find out what is the minimum of it. If I take a minimum of it, what I will get? I will get this point. Let's say this is another point, right? If I minimize over all these distances, I will get this distance, right? It means I am finding, if I will minimize now over all these distances, I will get the point which is nearest to the hyperplane. Only one point, right? Yes or no? You are minimizing over all these distances and it will give you the point which is very near to the hyperplane. Cool. Very good. So very nice. Okay. Then you will maximize it, right? So till here you are saying you are minimizing it. So it will give you the point which is nearest to the hyperplane. And then what you will do, you maximize over your hyperplane. So now you change your hyperplane such that this distance will be maximized, right? So you will change your hyperplane. How you will change your hyperplane? Because the hyperplane is defined by W and beta. So you will change your orientation. Either you slide it from here to here, or you just rotate it from here to here, right? So you are changing your W and beta. It means you're changing your orientation of a hyperplane such that the minimum distance should be maximized, right? So that's why it is a maximum here. So you are minimizing over all the distances. Then you are maximizing with respect to your hyperplane. What will happen then? Try to see this carefully. So this was, let's say, the minimum distance, right? And this is the second highest distance, right? This is the second highest distance. In effort of maximizing it, you will shift your hyperplane into this direction, right? You will shift further and you will get here, right? You will shift further, you will get here. Then this is the minimum distance now. But what will happen? Then this is the this will be the other distance. Then you will in effort of maximizing this, you will do what? You will somewhere optimally fall in between. Right? You will fall in between where the perpendicular distance from both classes will be equal, right? Intuitively, is it making sense to you guys? Yes or no? Right. So in effort of minimizing and maximizing, minimizing with respect to the point and maximizing with respect to hyperplane, I will land somewhere that my hyperplane is actually in the middle of the and it will be equidistant from the nearest points from both classes, right? So if you understand this, then you understood the construct of the objective, right? And the only thing is now the optimization. This is the objective which you want to minimize and minimize over the points and maximize over the hyperplane. This is the objective of a support vector machine. Till here, if you understood the things. Okay, I want to stop now because it's 12:45 almost. So let's continue from there on Monday. Please let me know if you have any questions regarding anything. So I want you to just finish your this Gaussian process thing probably by next Wednesday. So you submit by Wednesday evening, right? It's a quite good enough time because I have already provided you all the things which is required. In case you have any problem, please let me know. Thank you. Drop your attention.